They didn't salute her. They didn't follow her orders. They didn't even know her name. To them, she was just the med tent girl, a quiet civilian with no rank, no power, and no place in the war zone. But one day, in the middle of a brutal attack, when bullets rained down and soldiers were bleeding out, she took over. And when it was over, a general looked her in the eye and said, "You saved the entire unit." It started with the sound of artillery booming through the skies. Shaking the ground, soldiers screamed and ran. Blood soaked the dust, one by one. Wounded men were carried into the medical tent at Forward Station 4, a small outpost near the front line. Inside the tent stood a girl. Tiny, thin, hair tied back, hands already covered in blood. Tessa Wynne? No. One knew much about her. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't in uniform. She wore no badge, no stripes, no rank. She was a civilian contract medic working support duty. Most days she changed bandages, checked blood pressure, gave out cough medicine. The military doctors barely noticed her. The young soldiers joked. Behind her back, "She's too soft for this place. She should be in a library, not a war zone." Even the officers dismissed her. "Morning, med tent girl," Sergeant Martinez would say, like it was a joke. Tessa never argued. She just smiled softly and said, "Good morning, Sergeant," then went back to preparing supplies, checking equipment, and cleaning instruments, always quiet, always precise. But Corporal Drew noticed something different. He saw the way she moved, like a soldier, like someone who had done this before, arrived every morning at 0530 sharp. No one asked her to, she just did it. Organizing tools, restocking shelves, adjusting monitors, all before anyone else arrived, while others were still yawning. She was already working, but it wasn't just her timing, it was the way she worked. Every motion had purpose. She positioned tools exactly where they'd be needed later. She anticipated what supplies would run out. She double-checked everything as if someone's life depended on it. To some, it looked obsessive. But to Drew, it looked like muscle memory. He'd seen that kind of intensity before. On the battlefield, from people who had already lost too many lives. One day, two medics were arguing over how to treat a chest injury. The manual says, "You secure the airway first," one said. "No." The other argued, "You'll lose too much blood before the tubes even in." Tessa stood silently, holding a box of gauze. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She knew exactly what to do, because she'd done it before. Dozens of times, in worse places. But she stayed quiet, because she knew what would happen. If she spoke up, "You're just a contractor," they'd say. "Don't act like you've been to war." So she said nothing. Instead, she worked harder. Every evening, when others left, she stayed behind, wiping down trays, refilling morphine, and checking every piece of equipment twice. When asked why, she simply said, "Because tomorrow, someone might need it, and I won't let them down." In those quiet moments, Drew started to wonder, who was this girl really? Because no civilian medic acted like that. Not unless they had been through something, not unless they had seen things, no. One should see, and something in her eyes told him that she had. It happened suddenly, a surprise enemy attack. Boom, Charlie artillery took a direct hit. Over 30 wounded soldiers were rushed to the med tent at Forward Station 4. It was chaos, screams, blood, panic. The senior doctors, all gone, called to the front. Only one young resident doctor and 2 medics remained, and Tessa Dot, just the med tent girl at first. No one looked at her. No one thought she should lead. She had no rank, no authority. But she didn't wait for permission. She stepped forward. "Tourniquet. Now," she shouted. She moved through the chaos like a storm, fast, focused, unstoppable. She stopped bleeding, assessed injuries, organized stretchers by severity. ABC protocol, she said. Airway, breathing, circulation. She wasn't just helping, she was leading. Without a badge, without orders, she took charge. At first, no one listened. But then, a soldier survived because of her decision. Then another. Eyes started turning to her. Medics began following her instructions. Even the overwhelmed doctor froze as Tessa took over triage. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't loud, but her voice carried strength. Red tag, he needs surgery now. Yellow tag, urgent but stable. Green, minor. Move them to the far corner. She moved. With such confidence, such speed, like she'd done it all before. The same medics who once mocked her stood still, watching her hands move like a surgeon's. "Where did you learn to do this?" asked Private Johnson. Stunned, Dessa didn't even look up. "Someone has to," she said, already saving the next life. After the wave of wounded slowed, Corporal Drew couldn't take it anymore. He quietly searched her background files. Civilian contractor. Clean record. Nothing unusual. But then he found an old photo from 2020. A military field unit. A woman kneeling in the dirt, blood on her face, holding morphine. Surrounded by artillery fire. It was her. "Tessa," he asked her quietly, "did you serve in the red zone?" She paused, then whispered, "I was once in a place with no way out. You either saved them, or you watched them die." That night, Drew saw her alone in the tent, practicing trauma procedures in the dark. No one asked her to. No one was watching. Only someone who had lost people because they were 10 seconds too slow would do that, and only someone who refused to let it happen again would stay up perfecting every step, alone, in silence. Day 14, just before dawn. A multi-point rocket attack hit the base. Explosions ripped through the command post. Communications went down. Officers were wounded. Station 4 became the central med point for the entire region. There was no time to think, no time to wait. The entire camp turned into a disaster zone. And once again, Tessa stepped forward. She didn't ask. She didn't wait. She assumed full control of the field medical area just like before. "Move green tags to the supply tent," she ordered. "Convert the briefing room into a surgical bay. Martinez, you're with me on red zone wounds. Johnson pain meds. Red tags only. No morphine unless they're crashing." Even the resident doctor, who had once mocked her, didn't argue. He simply nodded and followed. Because in the middle of destruction, Tessa was the commandant. Then they brought in a brigadier general. He was unconscious. Uniform torn. Bleeding internally. Shrapnel in his chest. Dying. The on-duty medic froze. "We don't have the tools for this," whispered Dr. Martinez. "This is beyond our limits." But Tessa didn't hesitate. "Yes, we do," she said quietly. She grabbed tools, improvised, tubing, and began the impossible. Her hands moved fast, like a surgeon in a trauma center, with field tools and nothing more. She opened a new artery path to stabilize the general's blood flow. It was risky, dangerous, but it worked. Everyone stood in silence, watching the girl they once ignored perform medical miracles. Hours later, the general woke up. He looked around, confused. "Who treated me?" he asked. All the medics stepped back and pointed to her. He stared, long and hard, his voice low. "I know those eyes. Fallujah, 2020. You're the Sparrow medic, aren't you?" The room went completely silent. Everyone froze. Sparrow? That word hit, like ATHUNDERCLAP. The general ordered classified records opened. What they found shocked the entire tent. Tessa Wynn had once been one of the top battlefield medics in the world, a member of the elite Mobile Emergency Response Unit, codenamed Sparrow. She wasn't a rookie. She wasn't a beginner. She was the medic who had saved 37 soldiers under artillery fire. After her own unit was wiped out in 2021, she'd been through Syria, Yemen, Iraq. She had done trauma surgery under fire. She'd treated anaphylactic shock in red zones. And she'd survived an ambush that killed every teammate because she refused to leave the wounded behind. After that mission, she resigned, disappeared, erased her records, and came back as a nameless contract medic. The tent was stunned. The girl they called Med Tent Girl, the one they laughed at, was a legend in military medicine, a soldier who had once lost everything, but came back to keep others alive. Not for rank, not for medals, but because she'd made a promise. When Drew asked her later, "Why didn't you reclaim your rank?" she said only one thing: "Because I once let someone die. I was 10 seconds too slow. I came back so it never happens again." After the revelation, everything changed. No one called her Med Tent Girl anymore. The base restructured its medical team. The old tent where Tessa had worked was preserved and renamed Sparrow Zone, in honor of the woman who had no rank but led better than any officer. They offered her medals, recognition, promotion. But Tessa refused them all. When asked why, she simply said, "I don't save lives for medals. I'm just keeping a promise," and quietly, she kept working. But her impact had already begun to spread. Military medics started changing how they trained. Not just tools and protocols, but mindset. They began teaching Sparrow protocols how to act under pressure, how to improvise when equipment fails, how to read faces, not just charts, how to stay calm when a commander collapses, how to lead without shouting, how to trust people even if they have no stripes on their shoulder. They even changed the motto on the training tent. A photo of Tessa kneeling beside a wounded soldier hung in the corner. Underneath it, the words, "Silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation." And Drew, the soldier who first saw her for who she was. He led the first class based on her methods. When a new trainee asked, "How do we know who the real heroes are?" Drew didn't hesitate. He pointed at the photo and said, "You. Don't look for their title. You watch their hands and listen to their silence." Months passed, and then, one day, Tessa was gone. No farewell, no speech, just gone. But in every cabinet, she left a handwritten note. If your hands shake, remember, someone is waiting for them to come home alive. You are not allowed to panic. The first blood-stained cloth she used to save the general, it was framed and placed in the command room. Beneath it, the words, "She didn't need a title. She needed us to live." A year later, the entire military medical system changed. Now, medics were included in tactical planning. They trained for 90-second emergency decisions, just like Tessa had. The term Med Tent Girl, gone forever. Now they were called combat field medics with respect. When someone asked how to know if they had the courage to act, even when no one told them to, the answer became simple. If Tessa Wynn could do it, you can too, as long as you do it for life, not for glory. Today, she works at a small veteran care center in Denver. No nameplate, no uniform, just the quiet medic, teaching military families how to respond in a crisis. A visiting colonel once asked, "Why do you still do this?" She replied softly, "Because someone taught me that lives are worth more than recognition. And that lesson doesn't end when the uniform comes off." She never became famous. Her face isn't on posters, but her legacy lives everywhere. In the hands of every medic who learned to trust themselves, in the hearts of every soldier who lived because someone didn't wait for permission. In every battlefield where silence became preparation, she wasn't just a medic, she was a reminder that the quiet ones are often the strongest of all.